The fight action is back. This upcoming Saturday, we have UFC Paris to look forward to as we come into it off of one of the rare weekends that the UFC left us hanging. I know some of you guys were walking in circles around your living room, just looking for something to do. And, in reality, they didn't leave us hanging because they've been treating us to some fine DWCS action every single Tuesday night. The format of that show, it just works perfectly. Okay, a little bit of a slow start in week one, but how about the last couple of weeks? I mean, these fighters are going out there and looking to take each other out. I absolutely love that show. Okay, but this is a real treat though. UFC Paris, it's a stacked event. Europe gets some love over there. Nice little start time for them and all of that, and they get to display some of their more fine talent. All right, in the main event, Nassourdine Imavov takes on Caio Borralho. I have some, I don't know if I want to say bold thoughts, but I do have some clear thoughts on what that fight means to the future of the division. And I've been talking about it for the last couple of weeks, but we now have more clarity. And I want to know if you guys agree with what I'm about to say. Okay, you guys hit the comment section up below. But how about this? We have the UFC debut of the Octagon doubleweight champion, Losene Keita, who will be taking on Patricio Pitbull. And that's just a great matchup there. We get to see if Keita is really on that level. I've been hearing from a lot of the European fan base. Okay, I've been getting a lot of DMs on Instagram for some time about this young fighter who is a real treat to watch. And Patricio Pitbull, the veteran who had a slow start to his UFC career, but we saw in his last fight that he's still a high-level fighter, and I'm very interested to see how that plays out. Besides that, I have to mention the co-main event between Mauricio Rufy and BSD. Right, that fight is very exciting, and all in all, this is a stacked event, so I'm very pumped for it. Now, take a look at what's at stake for the future of the middleweight division with this main event matchup. A lot of you guys have been saying for a long time now, since this fight was announced, that the winner of this bout quite simply will be next to fight for the belt. There's just no question about that. At least a couple of you guys have been saying that. I've gone back and forth with you in the comment section. It's not that I completely disagree with you guys. In fact, I understand that was the most likely scenario, but I felt that a lot of you guys were just completely overlooking the possibility that Fluffy ended up getting a rapid shot at the title, right, based on the way some things were going to shake out. And look at what we have in front of us now, the information we have in front of us now. Fluffy just ran through Roman Delija. Okay, he didn't just get his hand raised. He went out there and won in spectacular fashion, bullied him up, ragdolled him and all that. I mean, his stock is so high. He's on an 8-fight winning streak, and then he quickly gets booked to fight again. He's fighting Reinier de Ridder, RDR, who's just an animal. He's on a 5-fight winning streak, and he already has the name coming over from 1. Right now, the winner of that fight, if Fluffy goes out there and wins that fight, he's on a 9-fight winning streak. And that fight is taking place just about a month after this weekend's main event here. So don't act like, it doesn't make sense from a time standpoint. The new champion, Chimaev, is averaging about a fight per year. So, if you feel that one of these fighters are going to be holding him up, I don't know about all that, okay? If Fluffy wins that fight, and for that matter, if RDR wins that bout too, he'll be on a 6-fight winning streak, and his momentum is crazy. Now you compare it to who may get the job done here. Now, if Imavov wins, I think that he has a little bit more of a case because he's been defeating the big names. That's what he has going for himself, and I think that's why a lot of you feel he's the one to be next. He's been looking spectacular, but he has the names like Israel Adesanya, Brendan Allen, Cannonier, and also Roman Delija. Of course, he didn't do it like my boy Fluffy did, but he has those big names there. If he defeats Caio, that's another big ranked name that he has to build off of. So yes, he very well can be next, but here's the catch to it. He needs to deliver. He has to fight in exciting fashion. This can't be a fight where he's fighting from the outside, just kind of outpointing Caio. He has to deliver, because if he just gets the job done and it's not an exciting bout, and then you got Fluffy and RDR squaring off here in a couple weeks, and that fight you already know is going to be crazy, I feel that Fluffy can surpass Imavov. If Caio gets his hand raised here against Imavov, even though he has a nice little winning streak going for himself, I don't think that his winning streak would be near comparable to Fluffy's. It would be one back, but the level of opponent's higher for Fluffy. And I would even say that RDR's 6-fight winning streak, if he were to win, is more respectable than Caio's 8-fight winning streak, but he has a lot of early victories in the UFC that aren't that respectable. So, I mean, I just think that this thing could shake out a couple different ways. First and foremost, let's see who gets their hand raised here. If Imavov goes out here and gets a finish, or just wins in dominating fashion in an exciting fight, yeah, then at that point, it may not even matter what Fluffy or RDR do a month later. He may have a date booked with Chimaev coming up. And maybe you see the winner of RDR and Fluffy facing off with, let's say, like a DDP or something like that. I mean, there's a lot of fun fights. You guys know the division is so stacked at the top. I can sit here and do all kinds of matchmaking and rave about what's going on in the top 10, top 15 of this division, but I won't do that to you guys. We're going to jump right in to the show here. If you're new here, guys, smash that subscribe button. If you could all smash the like button, it means a lot to me. Go catch me on all my social media and all that. And we're going to start with the first fight and work our way up towards the top. We're going to dissect the betting odds for each and every match, and we're going to predict how these fights are going to play out. I'm going to give you method of victory, what round the finish would take place if it does, and all that. So thank you guys for tuning in. And of course, if you're interested in the official targets that I will have for this event, you guys know you could shoot me an email or DM me on Instagram or Twitter. Let's go jump into this thing. We'll kick this thing off in the welterweight division, where we have the UFC debut of the Aries lightweight champ, the undefeated Frenchman Axel Sola. He'll be taking on Rhys McKee, who can pleasantly now say he is a true UFC vet. And the reason why I say it like that is because if you guys remember, he had that initial stint in the UFC where he went 0-2 and was rapidly cut. He was just 24 years old when he faced off against Khamzat Chimaev. I mean, what a welcoming party that is. I mean, we knew Chimaev had all this potential even back then, but I don't think anybody could really say they understood how great he is. I mean, now we see what he's been doing, and he has potential. He has potential to become the greatest of all time if he stays active and just continues to do what he's doing. He then followed that up with a loss to Alex Morono, which it's important to note that Morono was the much more primed and mature fighter at that point in time. He was still very young, and Morono had his days. I know that he kind of fell off a cliff, but Morono was once a very well-rounded threat in the UFC. And look what McKee did since getting cut. He went 3-0 against fighters like Justin Burlinson and Jimmy Wallhead as he returned to Cage Warriors, and he continued his finishing ways. He's finished every single fight that he's won, right? He's a true fight finisher. He brings in that energy to the cage. Now, you take a look at his return stint, he's just 1-2, and you may be looking at that scratching your head, but if you actually dive into the tape, or if you remember these fights, right, the Angelusa one, he had a slow start to it, but then he finished very strongly. Okay, he took the third round there, and he showed that the heart and the desire in that fight. And then the Chidi Njokuani one was a very closely contested match. It went to a split decision. Some people thought that he won that fight. You see him building on the momentum that led him up to that last bout against Daniel Frunza, where the pace in that first fight was crazy. We saw him hurt Frunza very badly. He brutalized Frunza's eye. He destroyed his lip. It was actually the lip that caused the stoppage after the first round, but he showcased that he is a dangerous striker. And what I like for him in this match is, even though Sola is a very polished striker, that's his bread and butter, McKee is going to have a nice reach advantage here, okay? And Sola can hurt you. He can land on you and hurt you, but he's there to be hit as well. I've seen him sat down a couple of times. So I think that McKee can weather the storm, avoid being finished, and I think that McKee, as the fight progresses, will have opportunities to hurt Sola. Right? I think that McKee is more battle-tested and more proven if this fight goes there, and I think that McKee is quite a durable fighter. He's been finished twice via strikes, but one was the Chimaev ground and pound, and the other one happened very early on. I've seen him take a lot of damage and march forward. Okay, and McKee is the natural welterweight fighter here as Sola comes up from the lightweight division. He fought in the welterweight division early on in his pro career, and he also has fought in the middleweight division as an amateur, and he has a lengthy amateur resume. So even though McKee has double the amount of pro experience, Sola has that amateur resume, but I still put more merit into the pro fights that McKee has. And if you take a look at fighters like Chidi Njokuani and Angelusa, you take those fighters and you throw them in there against the fighters that Sola's fighting over at Aries, I think that they would run through the opposition over there. Okay, so I like the fact that McKee has been in there, but with just much more high-level competition, and he never looks for a way out. So I really like what he has going for himself there. I think that we do see this fight play out mostly on the feet. Both fighters have shown flashes with their grappling. McKee has some solid jiu-jitsu skills, and Sola has picked up the grappling aspect of the game rapidly as well to go along with his polished striking. I think that he's shown some flashes there. We've seen him defending and reversing and hurting fighters down on the mat as well. But I think this fight should take place in the feet. It should be a war, and I favor the larger fighter that's a little bit more proven with his heart and his toughness and all that. So give me Rhys McKee to get a late stoppage in this fight and we take a look at the odds here. He opened up over here as a plus 140, and he's now a plus 112. So we see action coming in him, but he's still the underdog here. And I think that there's value on him with the plus sign next to his name. We'll see what Sola is about, but I think I know what McKee is about. And the fact that he's just 29 and he's coming into his prime and he's starting to get that confidence behind him, I think that this is a very good spot for McKee to get his hand raised and to then go on a 2-fight winning streak. And it'll be much needed. He needs to take advantage of any opportunity to get his hand raised, because if he gets cut again, I mean, there's a small chance he'll get a third opportunity, and all he wants to do is fight in the UFC. So you better go out there and showcase what you're about, McKee. Shauna Bannon takes on Sam Hughes in the strawweight division, and I think that this is a very solid matchup for Hughes here, as Bannon is very fortunate to say that she is 2-1 in the UFC. Of course, she dropped that first bout to Bruna Brazil, where she looked very low level, and then somehow she wins 2 fights in a row. I thought that she took an L against Elise Ardeline, went to a split decision. She was controlled for extensive periods of time in that fight. And in her last fight against Pooja Tamar, she's very fortunate that she pulled off that armbar. We'll give her credit for pulling it off, but she was hurt, and she showed that she is there to be hit on the feet. She's just very low level with her striking, and I think that Sam Hughes can take advantage of that. And I also feel that Hughes can take advantage of Bannon's lack of wrestling abilities. Okay, I've seen Hughes go out there and control fighters. Like, you look at the Jacqueline Amorim fight, who Amorim has much more polished BJJ than Bannon has. Okay, Bannon has some skills down there for sure. I mean, maybe she gets lucky to slap on some kind of armbar, but I don't see that happening. I've seen Hughes go down to the mat with a fighter like Amorim and win a unanimous decision. Okay, we've seen her dominate down on the mat. You think of the Elise Reed fight. That was a fight that went down to the mat, and she finished her up with elbows. I mean, she's dangerous there. She comes in on a 2-fight winning streak. Now, they both were via split decision, but I still like what she's been showing. Stephanie Luciano is a young fighter that seems to have some skills, and she went out there and she stifled her. You take a look at her losses, they're all respectable. Yasmin Girgui has had her problems, but she's a talented striker. Piero Rodriguez has looked phenomenal. Luana Pinedo, Loma Legmumi, Tisha Pennington, Vanessa Demopoulos is the one that doesn't look that good, but that was a long time ago. That was over in the LFA, and she got caught with a late sub, but I feel that Hughes is starting to put it together, and she has the recipe to win this fight. She's going to get the better of the striking. Okay, she's going to be much more fluid and polished there, and then she just needs to avoid being subbed, and she'll be the fighter that should be in top position, solidifying rounds. So quite honestly, the only way I see Bannon winning this fight is if she pulls off some type of sub off her back, if she catches Hughes slipping in that fashion, and I'm not going to bank on that. So I'm going to say that Hughes wins this fight via decision. I'm going to say it goes to a decision. Bannon has shown to be pretty tough, but I would not be surprised if we see a little bit of ketchup on the face of Bannon, and we see her hair kind of, as bleach blonde as it is. You see it like dyed, that look when the red hits the blonde. And I think that she may have an ugly look on her face, and we'll see how that goes for her. But I do believe that she is going to start to be exposed. The fact that she's 2-1 in the UFC is not indicative of who she is as a fighter. She's a fighter that should be like 1-3 and now cut by the UFC. So, and that's what I expect to happen down the line. And hopefully I'm not being too much of a hater, but I also feel that Hughes is an under the radar type of fighter, and she's been putting in a lot of time into her physical training. That'll pay dividends as well. So it looks like we take a look at the betting odds, and it's understood. People are on the same page as me. It's very apparent how people expect this fight to play out, where Hughes is almost a minus 300. And I think that it is somewhat warranted. It's a high line for a women's strawweight bout, but I think that it's an accurate line. And if I had to pick which side I want to be on, I want to be on the Hughes side, even with this line being high. I think that this is a potential parlay piece, or I think that you might want to target Hughes to win this fight via decision and try to get the line to come down. But Hughes is who I would be backing here one way or another, right? So I do have her winning a decision. Brad Tavares takes on Robert Bryczek, as Bryczek is hunting for that first ever victory inside the UFC. Both these fighters have very similar fighting styles. They do like to involve themselves in a stand-up fight. I would say Bryczek is a little bit more boxing oriented. He really favors his hands, while Tavares does as well, but he'll mix in the calf kicks and the kicking game a little bit more so. And Bryczek is more of a fight finisher, right? You take a look out of his 17 victories, 10 of them come by way of KO. Okay, and it's by way of his hands. His hands are dangerous. Tavares with just 7 knockouts out of 21 victories. But you have to take into consideration that Tavares, he has fought the bulk of his career inside the UFC. All right, so he's fighting way higher level of competition. Who's to say that if Tavares wasn't fighting over there in Octagon and all that, that he wouldn't be starching dudes left and right? I don't know. I mean, that's something to take into consideration. Tavares is 37 years old now, but he still shows to have something left, and it's not really due to his last victory against Gerald Meerschaert, because that's a fight where, especially after seeing Gerald's last fight, Tavares should have went out there and got a knockout. Okay, but it's actually the fight prior, the Jun Young Park fight. Okay, Park is a stud, and that was a very competitive match. I think that Tavares showcased that he still has something left, and it was important at that point in time because he was coming into that bout off the Gregory Rodriguez knockout. He was knocked out by Bruno Silva a little bit prior to that, right? We started to see that the chin starting to give out, and that's something you have to pay attention to in a matchup like this because, as mentioned before, Bryczek can put you out with his hands, and if Bryczek's gonna get his hand raised, I think that that's how he's going to have to do it. Okay, it's not out of the realm that he could win a decision as well, of course, in a kickboxing type of match, but I think that the knockout is the real path to victory because I don't have a lot of faith in him winning a decision right now after the way that he looked against Ihor Potieria in that UFC debut, where he was outstruck 77-41 on total strikes. All right, yeah, he showcased some takedown defense and all that, but I'm not really worried about Tavares going the takedown path. Okay, I think that Tavares can outvolume him and outpoint him, and at the end of the day, that's how I see this fight playing out. I think that's the most realistic situation. I think that's the most realistic scenario that we see is Tavares being a crafty veteran and just outlanding Bryczek here. But keep an eye on a counter strike to be landed by Bryczek, or also keep an eye on Bryczek to be very motivated, knowing that this is very realistically his last opportunity. If he doesn't go out there and get his hand raised, we probably don't see him in the UFC again. So if he's very hungry and he's on the gas a little bit more than he has been in the past, maybe he finds that chin. But give me Tavares to win this fight via decision. I'm calling a decision here. Tavares is right around a minus 240, 250 right now. He opened up around a minus 260. Line's coming down a little bit, and I think that's to be expected. I do believe that there is some slight value, if you will, on the dog here, which you can catch right around plus 200. I think that there's more value on that kind of line. Bryczek's 35 years old. I mean, this is the fight of his career. I feel confident in saying that, but I still don't think he'll have it. I think he loses a decision. This should be a good one here in the welterweight division. Sam Patterson takes on Trey Waters, and both these fighters have some similarities in the sense that they both keep their hands low with their striking. I would say that Sam Patterson is the more proven grappler, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He really has shown some flashes down on the mat. Where I'm concerned about him is with his striking defense, and we saw that on full display when he took on Yanal Ashmos. He got caught with the KO there, and since then he does go up in weight to the welterweight division, coming up from 155, and he's 3-0 up at 170, and he has looked much improved. And how about the growth that was on display in Patterson's last fight against Danny Barlow, where he got the knockout, and Patterson was a huge underdog. He caught Barlow with the nasty check hook, and once he had Barlow on skates, man, he was in on him. He finished him up, and it was a very impressive victory. Before that, he had the 2 submission victories in the first round against lower level fighters Crosby and Johan Lanes, but once again showcasing that he is dangerous on the mat. So, but where I still am a little cautious with Patterson is with his striking defense. Hopefully he is continuously working on that in the gym, and he's refining that, because as you guys know, they're wearing small gloves, and it only takes one. You walk forward with your head like a Pez dispenser there, and Waters does have some boxing skills. I don't really look at him as a power puncher. In fact, he's not. He's more of like a volume boxer. We saw that on full display in his last bout against Billy Goff, where he was victorious. But you have to note, how many strikes were landed on him. He was actually outstruck in that fight 129 to 107. He was landing the more significant strikes. He deserved to get his hand raised. But we'll see if he could test the chin of Patterson here, and if he could actually try to sit down on his strikes a little bit more so, because I think that as the fight progresses, it could benefit Patterson. I think Patterson is the more well-rounded threat, but where I do see an avenue for victory for Patterson, which there's a couple here. Okay, Waters is there to be hit too, and he keeps his hands low. Patterson does have striking ability, so I mean he could land as well, but I like the grappling edge. I think that if Patterson can get this fight down to the mat, he will have a solid jiu-jitsu advantage. And it wasn't that long ago we saw Waters submitted in the octagon, right? In his bout on Dana White's Contender Series against Gabriel Bonfim, he was caught in that Von Flue choke in the first round, caught nice and early. So no matter how you spin it for me, I do like backing Patterson here, which the line's going to be close. We'll get to that here in a second. But I just feel that Patterson is the more well-rounded fighter. And as long as he avoids running into a big strike, I think that he ends up even winning a decision in a striking type of fight. And Waters has skills there, but it's the grappling, it's the jiu-jitsu skills that I think that you have in your back pocket if you're backing Patterson. And hopefully he gets the fight to the mat. And I think that he could open up a scenario like that. So take a look at the line movement here. Patterson opened up on some of these books around a minus 200, and he is cruising down to right around a minus 155. I'm very curious to see how far down this line comes. I like the Patterson side, so the more this line keeps coming down, the better that is for me. I would love to see this fight around pick'em odds. I think that Patterson is going to figure this thing out. He's going to figure the whole overall game out, and he understands that he needs to sharpen up his striking defense. And once he does that, he has a lot of offensive threats that he brings to the table. So give me Patterson to get the job done, and I'll say he pulls off a sub. William Gomis looks to bounce back with the victory as he comes into this one off that tough split decision L that he took against Haider Amil. With no shame in losing to Amil, right? Undefeated fighter. Oh no, he's not undefeated anymore. He just got buzz sawed by Jose Delgado. Okay, but on a serious note, Amil is a very tough customer, and a lot of people thought that Gomis won that fight, and he showed a lot of flashes in it. Once again, he's an electrifying fighter who's throwing all types of spinning back fists and all that. He's actually quite technical as well. He's well-rounded. I think that he is, I'm not going to say a dark horse, but he's a fighter that is kind of under the radar, because when you take into consideration that he's just 28 years old and has time to refine some things, I do believe that he has a lot of things going for himself, right? He has a nice frame for the division. He's a solid athlete. And I think that when he's 31, 32, he could be a fighter that makes some noise. I mean, I don't know how much noise, but he'll make some noise. On the other hand here, we have the intern KSW champ, Robert Ruchała. If you're familiar with him, as I've been breaking down tape on him, he's a fun fighter to watch, but I think that he is lacking in a major way in a couple different departments. Okay, one thing, I think that he is there to be hit, or he opens himself up as he's very aggressive and very wild with his offensive attack, and I don't think that he's really been tested that much. He was recently finished about 3 fights ago. He was finished in the 4th round. That was a wild one. You could pull it up on YouTube as Parnassi finished him up there. Excuse me on the pronunciation there, but that one was wild. He kind of had him in a position where he stood up and he hit him with a soccer kick to the midsection and finished him up there. And besides that, we have seen Robert hurt before. I've seen him dropped in a couple other fights, even though he then came back and got his own finish, showing some toughness. But this is going to be a tough matchup for him. And I also want to bring up the Damian Stasiak fight, which you could pull that whole thing up on YouTube as well. And that was a close one. It went to a split decision. And Stasiak essentially was a UFC reject. Okay, he took a lot of L's inside the octagon, even took an L to Brian Kelleter to show you what level that he's on. So you kind of can do some MMA math to get an idea of where Robert's at. But Robert's young. He's 27. I do expect to see some growth from him, but I don't expect to see any growth warranted backing him against a fighter like William Gomis. And in fact, I think that Gomis is a stylistic nightmare for a fighter like Robert, who, as he comes in aggressively, I could see Gomis countering him with something and hurting him and finishing him. And that's the route I am going to go. I'm going to say, check this out. I'm going to say William Gomis wins this fight via a spinning attack, whether it's a spinning back elbow or a spinning back fist. I think that he's going to hurt Robert in this fight. And even if he doesn't land something that crazy, I still think that he can put himself in a position to find a finish on this tornado, Robert. And, listen, if Robert's smart, he goes out there and he does look to deliver in that fashion where at least it's entertaining. And then the UFC gives him another opportunity. Okay. I think he would be smart to go kind of that path. I don't know, maybe I'm jumping the gun here. We'll see. He's young, but I don't know if he's going to be the type of fighter that would have a lengthy career in the UFC by being a tactical technician. I don't see that when I'm watching the tape on him. So give me Gomis to get the job done and to get him out of there. And I'll say that Gomis gets him out of there. This one, I don't know if I want to call it an early KO necessarily, but I'm in on Gomis getting that KO. For those of you guys that really want an answer on an under 1.5 or so, it doesn't have to be quick. It could be a later KO too, but somewhere towards the middle or latter half. But you never know, man, because this Polish fighter's going to come out the gates shooting. That's a tough call. I think I'm giving you a strong enough call here on the Gomis to win this fight via knockout. All right. And you take a look at the money line. Gomis opened up right around a -190 with the action coming in on him. And I think that is warranted. I'm in on Gomis even where this line stands. And I expect him to continue to creep up or, that's what I would expect. And I like him anywhere as high as being like a -275 favorite. Right. I think that's more where he is. At 170, Rinat Fakhretdinov takes on Andreas Gustafsson. And these fighters are coming into this match with real different energy behind them. Gustafsson has made a name for himself now, coming in off the victory from Dana White's Contender Series to the UFC, where he just absolutely dominated KS Williams, right? It wasn't the fact that he went out there and just got his hand raised. He imposed his will and dominated KS from start to finish. And you don't really see a lot of people do that to KS Williams, right? Walking him down, not afraid of the danger that KS possessed on the feet. Meanwhile, Fakhretdinov arguably should not have had his hand raised in 3 consecutive fights, right? He went to the draw a little bit ago against Zaleski dos Santos, and then he followed that up with somehow getting his hand raised against Nicholas Dalby and Carlos Leal back-to-back times, where a lot of people had him losing those fights. And in fact, almost everybody had him losing to Carlos Leal. And that fight hasn't aged that well, as Leal just got knocked out in devastating fashion as he was a massive underdog against Muslim Salikov. And, I'll say this. You don't want to completely overlook Fakhretdinov here because he is still a fighter that checks off a lot of boxes. We know that he has high-level grappling. If you guys forgot what he did to Brian Battle, I mean, nobody really has taken Battle down like that. I mean, he was ragdolling him in that fight. That was the only L that Battle took inside the octagon. Old Battle now is in the old dirty boxing scene, but he followed that victory up with a submission over Kevin Lee, made quick work of Lee, hurt him on the feet before he snagged up the guillotine choke. Okay, and then from there is where we saw him kind of take a step back, but I still believe he has some abilities, and where he potentially could have success in this fight would be if he's able to implement his wrestling game and get Gustafsson down to the mat. Maybe we see Gustafsson exposed a little bit there, but it's not what I'm expecting. I think that Gustafsson shows to be pretty well-rounded there. The way he was ragdolling and taking KS Williams down against the cage, and where Gustafsson really thrives is in the clinch and in those high grappling exchanges there. He's very physically strong, and I could see him preventing Fakhretdinov getting to the hips and getting to his legs, and I could see him having his own success in those types of situations. And this is an MMA fight too, so you can expect Gustafsson to work in the elbows and the knees. He does that just about as well as anybody in the game right now. He's devastating up close and tight with you in the clinch. He'll crack you up. He'll brutalize you. And that's where you could expect Gustafsson to score points. If it goes to a decision, he's racking up rounds in that manner. And at the same time, he is going to be looking to get a finish. All right, he pushes the pace. He is a fight finisher. Okay, he definitely is a fight finisher. And the one question mark you can have in regard to him, he doesn't have a lengthy resume of going out there and putting in that kind of work against high-level fighters. Pat Pitlick, he finished him on DWCS. That was the fighter that came off that Dana White's looking for a fight, and I don't think that Pitlick is all that. And Chaos kind of is, but that's just that one fight there. And Gustafsson had his couple of losses too. over there, before joining the UFC against somewhat respectable names, but still he was losing the fighters that he probably should have been winning. So I think that Gustafsson is a fighter that is developing a little bit later, right? He's 34, doesn't have a lot of fights. I think he's developing now, and he's a physical specimen. So I'm on Gustafsson here all day. I think that he's the fighter that's landing damage, and we kind of saw that Rinat doesn't do so well when you impose your will on him. When you really bring the fight to him, he'll slow down a little bit, and we saw that in the Dalby fight. He'll slow down and he'll kind of look to go in cruise control. And I just think that Gustafsson is going to be slamming it into high gears as the fight progresses, and he's going to be taking this fight over. And I think that there's an actual likelihood that he gets a finish here. I do. I think that there's a possibility that he could be the first fighter to have ever finished Fakhretdinov. Okay, 8 knockouts out of his 12 victories. When you're talking Gustafsson, right? He is a fight finisher, no question about it. But with that being said, I'm going to say he wins the decision. I think the KOs potentially lie, but I feel a little bit more comfortable backing the decision route here. I wouldn't be surprised if a fighter like Fakhretdinov uses tactics to kind of stall and let time play out if he does feel that he is vulnerable to being finished. So he has those kind of tactics to go to, but he'll still be down in the scorecards. I like Gustafsson to win this fight, and we've seen some very interesting line movement here. On some books, we've seen Gustafsson opening up as a solid underdog. Okay, let's see what we could find here. But I know he has opened up on some books as high as a plus 250. You guys probably can't see it here, but on some specific books, he was as high as a plus 250. Coming in as a dog in pretty much every book, and now this line has very much evened out, and you could still find Gustafsson as a dog on some books, but on some now he is cruising into being a favorite. But it's around pick'em odds, and I like Gustafsson. I'm interested to see where this line ends up at when the fight kicks off. But I know in my heart, I feel that Gustafsson is the rightful favorite. This dude brings in some real intangibles. He's a dog, and expect him to work nasty in the clinch, to really look to bully his way and damage Fakhretdinov en route to getting his hand raised. Hey, you guys, real quick, I just wanted to thank you for stopping by and tuning in to today's show. And I wanted to say, I'm sure you guys see there's been a couple new things that I've been unraveling here. This is nothing. This is the tip of the iceberg. I can't wait to show you what I'm really working on behind the scenes. There's going to be a lot of new stuff coming out. But if you guys can just smash that like button, smash the subscribe button, it helps me out a lot. I appreciate you so much, man. Smash those buttons for me. The longtime PFL veteran, Ante Delija, gets to make his UFC debut against a fighter in Marcin Tybura that already has a victory over him. Now, that first bout took place back in 2015, and it was due to an injury. I believe Delija broke his leg in that match, so I'm sure he has a redemption on his mind. And nevertheless, this is just such a huge opportunity for him to get his feet wet inside the octagon. He's 35 years old, but that's not necessarily that old for the heavyweight division. So we'll see if he can get some momentum kicking off here. If he was able to come in right off the rip and get a W against the number 7th ranked UFC fighter, I think that would be a good look for him, to say the least. And it wouldn't be the first time he's defeated a UFC caliber fighter, as he actually has a couple of victories over UFC veterans coming into this match, right? He just finished Yorgan De Castro in 42 seconds, showcasing how dangerous his hands are. Yorgan De Castro, a short-lived UFC career, but he was inside the octagon. He recently defeated Maurice Green. And also, if you take a look at some of the competition he's faced over in the PFL, I mean, some of them are respectable fighters. Matthias Scheffel, Renan Ferreira. He had 2 L's against Bruno Capoloza, who's a very dangerous fighter, so no real shame in those losses. How about the victory that he has over Denis Goltsov, who is a stud over in the PFL? So, I mean, he has shown that he is a legitimate heavyweight fighter, okay? And he is more than warranted to step in there and take on Tybura right off the rip. I truly believe that. I'll tell you what, I've been a little bit back and forth with which way I'm going to go with my selection, but I have settled in with a pick. I like Delija here based on the fact that he doesn't seem to slow down when you watch his fights. He doesn't really slow down, while Tybura, I don't know if I want to say he slows down, because he's slow from the rip and he kind of chugs along and stays in the same gear. But I think that Delija is going to be live to land a big strike all throughout this fight, right? He can land a big shot, not just in the first round, but in the second round, in the third round if it goes there. I think that he will be live to hurt Tybura throughout the fight. And I'm not willing to forget all the times that we've seen Tybura hurt. I know that he's kind of fixed a lot of those holes in his game, which the last time he was KO'd was in 2023 against Tom Aspinall, which, by the way, is a frequent training partner of Delia's right now. Delia has been training with Tom Aspinall quite a bit. And that was the last KO we saw Tybura take. But before that, you go way back, you scroll way back in time. He was knocked out by Augusto Sakai. He was knocked out by Shamil Abdurakhimov, knocked out by Derek Lewis. Okay, there was a string of KOs that we saw from him, even dating back to when he fought over in M1 against Stephen Putz. I mean, so his chin has been tested. I know that he's kind of fixed things up a little bit, but I'm not willing to forget the damage that I've seen him take in the cage. And yeah, he's going to look to push through it and kind of land his awkward volume style on Delia, but I like Delia striking better. And, Delia has been vulnerable to being taken down at times, but I like the way I've seen him pop back up, and he's worked on that aspect of his game throughout the years. And I look at him as a pretty well-rounded fighter. I think he avoids being smothered by Tybura there, and I think that he gets the better of the striking exchanges, all while I like the fact that if we see a knockout here, it's most likely coming by way of Delia, in my opinion. And Tybura, a lot of ups and downs going on through his career, and we remember what Spivak just did to him, or he fell into that armbar. Not to say that Delia is that kind of threat to sub him, but he's had those mental lapses in the cage, and I think that the Croatian is going to be I know he's very hungry coming into this spot, and I'm going to back him. I'm going to say he comes in and is victorious in his UFC debut. All right, I think he's a decent athlete for the division. He's a better athlete than Tybura, and Tybura is 39 years old. Okay, he's about to be 40. Right, you can get away with that in the heavyweight division, but it's still a plus to be 35, much more in your prime here. And so I will take the Croatian to get the job done, and I'm going to say he gets a KO. I'm going to call a KO here. I'm going to say Tybura goes back to his old ways where he gets hurt on the feet and he gets put out. So, of course, even after Oumar Sy had such a disappointing performance against Alonzo Menafield in that fight that took place recently in Atlanta, the UFC was still going to throw him on this Paris-France card. Okay, we understand that. You got to like what they did, though. They threw him in there with a fighter in Brendson Ribeiro who's going to bring that energy. And Ribeiro's going to go out there and look to get his own finish, all while being open to be finished, right? C's going to have an opportunity to go out there and get a finish over Ribeiro. So I like what the UFC did there. You take a look at what Ribeiro's been doing as of recently. He had the setback against Azamat Murzakanov where he was finished once again early on, right? He came into that fight on a 2-fight winning streak, but take a look at the W's, man, in retrospect. Chao Machado and Diar Nergoje, who are two low-level fighters. Okay, so they don't carry that much weight. Took 2 L's in a row before that, once again being knocked out early as Zhang Mingyang finished him up in the first round in his UFC debut. His real calling card was the Bruno Lopez fight, where he over-delivered. I think that if he were to fight Bruno Lopez 100 times, he's losing 80 to 90 times, something like that. I really do. I think that I'll give him credit. He went out there and he looked to land his damage, and he did. But if he didn't land that knockout shot, Lopez was going to be a step ahead. And Lopez would be very likely to land a lot of first-round KOs on Ribeiro if they battled over and over again. So you give him credit there, but you still got to understand what you're looking at when you get a Ribeiro. He had the Kimura, right, on Nergoje, so showing some grappling skills too. But C is a fighter that has very underrated grappling, as we saw him go out there and dominate Tukos in the first round. And even when you look back at his tape before joining the UFC, we've seen him put himself in dominant positions down on the mat and really open up with his striking. And to cut to the chase here, that's what I expect to see. I think that we're going to see C start to look a little bit more like we've seen him look in the past. I know his recent performances haven't been great, but I do think that this is the ideal matchup for him to go out there and to find another finish. And I think that it would be via a ground and pound, getting a TKO down the mat. The sub could potentially be there as well, but I'm going to say he lands some ground and pound on Ribeiro. Where he could get in trouble is if he gets caught stuck in the mud, stagnant on the feet once again with low output, and Ribeiro is the aggressor. Using his I don't know if I want to say wiry because he's still a big dude, right? This is a light heavyweight we're talking about, but he's kind of long for the division and he's explosive. And if he is the aggressor in this fight, maybe he can somehow work his way to a decision or he lands a KO. But I like C here. You take a look at the numbers and you notice the one glaring difference is that Ribeiro is much more there to be hit, as he is absorbing 4.04 strikes per minute while only landing 3.26, while C, on the other hand, has a nice ratio, 3.68 to his only 1.81. He's not really there to be hit. He's been fighting very cautiously. I think he'll fight cautiously here, all while eventually Ribeiro will just hand him something that he has to pick up off the ground. And you take a look at the odds. Ribeiro is a big dog. Okay, he opened up right around a plus 270. He's now almost as high as a plus 300. And I would still caution you on this line, but I mean, I want to be clear. I think that C delivers and gets the job done. I don't want to be backing him though, where he is as high, as a minus 450. I don't see value. I think that is a reckless target. But you might want to look at an under here and see what kind of value that we can get. And I'll look to get something coming out to you guys for a prop edition. Maybe this is a fight that we talk about. I haven't been getting to those as much. As you guys can see, I've been working on some things here behind the scenes. You're going to start to get a lot more content pumping out to you guys, so you guys can continuously expect those prop editions to come out to you, because a lot of times when we're breaking down these fights early, we don't have the available lines on the specific method of victory and all that. So that's what I want to talk about a little bit more. Maybe you're looking at the under 1.5 if there's some value there, but I do like C to get a finish via ground and pound. So we have one of the more hyped fighters to come into the UFC in quite some time here in Losene, Keita. He'll be taking on Patricio Pitbull. Now, Keita, coming over from the Octagon promotion where he was a dual weight class champ. He's essentially undefeated, if you will. His lone loss comes by way of a foot injury. He's shown to be an explosive knockout artist. He's a true athlete. He's only been training MMA for 8 years and didn't have any type of mixed martial arts background coming into when he started training the sport. So you have to take that into consideration when you're talking about him being matched against a lifelong martial artist in Patricio Pitbull. And sure, that's an advantage for Pitbull, but there's some advantages I could mention that go Keita's way as well. An advantage I'll mention that goes towards Pitbull's way is the fact that this fight's taking place in the featherweight division. I think that if this fight was at 155, that would benefit Keita even more. So I think he's the more naturally larger fighter here. He's younger. He's more primed. Now, when you want to talk about a path to victory for Patricio Pitbull, I think without a doubt, it's through his grappling. If he could do a little bit of what he just did to Dan Ige, mixing in some takedowns, I think that would be really paramount to him having success in this fight. It's not his only path to victory, but it would definitely help. You take a look back at that Ige fight where he got his first ever UFC victory. People were overlooking him. He was a dog in that fight after he had the slow start in his debut against Yair Rodriguez. Trust me, very familiar with that fight. As you guys know, I keep mentioning I was cage side sitting right behind Donald Trump, and I lost some money on my boy Pitbull in that one because I've always been a big believer in Pitbull. I think that he's the greatest Bellator fighter of all time, but he did not show up at all in that Yair fight. And I do think that he had some octagon jitters, which I was very surprised to see with the vet like him. He was very hesitant, and not to say that he wouldn't have lost that fight regardless, but we saw in the Ige fight that he was feeling more comfortable and he was more of himself, and he was using his craftiness to go out there and get his hand raised as he did. And he was 5 of 9 on his takedowns, had about 3 minutes of control time, but that was very important to that match there. And I think that he's going to need, he doesn't have to, but it's important that he can change levels and keep Keita honest and get this fight to drag out to the later rounds. I do believe that is important. If he wants to just, or if he gets caught up in a slugfest with Keita, Keita's going to be coming forward, and it's very likely that it's Keita that lands the KO here. He's younger. I just think that he's fresher. He has a lot more pop on his strikes right now. He's super aggressive, and I think that we most likely would see him get a KO, but you're not going to sit here and completely overlook Pitbull potentially hitting him with a counter, because he is excellent at sitting there and waiting for fighters to come in on him and catching them with a counter. I believe that's how you put Michael Chandler out back in the day. But the thing you have to take into consideration now is that he is 38 years old. You're talking about a fighter in Pitbull that he's on the tail end of his career. It's a shame that we didn't get to see him in the UFC from a younger age, while on the other hand, we're catching Losene Keita as a young fighter, right? He's going to be able to work his way through to his prime in the UFC. And that's a treat for us as fight fans. I know a lot of European fans are hyped to see him make his debut. I've gotten a lot of messages about him, and we're going to see how he looks with the step up in competition here. This was a fight that I was close to taking the dog and Patricio Pitbull, the dog, right? But no, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. The more I dove into the tape, I think that Keita will avoid being smothered down on the mat, and I could see Pitbull looking a lot more like he looked in the Yair fight compared to his last fight. I think that he's going to get stifled quite a bit, and he's going to fear the offensive threat of Keita. And you take a look back. I mean, he was recently KO'd in the first round over there in that Ryzen event against Chihiro Suzuki. He was KO'd there. He took an L against Sergio Pettis. Okay, so there have been some occasional L's coming through. Of course, the AJ McKee submission, which he did bounce back with the victory in the rematch. But, I got to go with my gut here. And although I'm a Pitbull fan, you got to go with the young, energetic fighter that has more mileage to give here and just has a couple more boxes that are being checked off, his physicality and all that. And I think we see a hesitant Pitbull. If Pitbull doesn't have success with his grappling and his wrestling, or doesn't catch Keita with that counter, we're going to see Keita be ahead in this fight. He could win a decision, but the KO is also very live. I'm going to say that this fight does go to the final bell. I'm going to say that Pitbull, as he fears that damage, he uses his craftiness to kind of avoid too many exchanges, and he'll slow the pace down, whether it's the clinch or just kind of go into survival tactics. But then even Keita still wins a decision here, landing damage, and the KO is still live. But we see here, Keita's right around a minus 225, where he opened up as a minus 245, and kind of seen that throughout the books here. He is the favorite, and on some books we're seeing action continuously come in on him. It really depends where you're looking. As we'll pull up on some other action here, where you saw him over here. He opened up as a minus 190, touched a minus 235, a lot of up and down action. So we've seen it go in different ways on different books. But one thing is certain, he's the favorite here. And, do I see a lot of value on him up in the minus 200 range? I don't. I think that the value's on the dog in Pitbull. I just don't have the guts right now to pick him in this spot. I've been 0-2 with my picks on Pitbull since he's joined the UFC, and I don't want to back him. He put a bad taste in my mouth with that debut fight against Yair, as I was sitting there cage side behind old Trump and the whole scene I was at, and he cost me money. He put a stain on my night, and I can't back him here, but it does have a lot to do with what you see on tape and the 38 that he is. So I say he loses a decision. For us, Zaim will without a doubt have the hometown advantage in this one, as he takes on the Brazilian Caio Fernandes. This bout takes place at 155, and I've been so pleased with the development that we've seen from Zaim, and I've been high on him since the beginning. When he came into the UFC, as he was just a little kid. I mean, what was he, like 20 years old? I'm trying to remember exactly how old he was at the time. He's 28 right now, and he came into the UFC back in 2019, so some quick math there. What was he, 22 or something like that? And that was a bout against Don Madge, who was a very highly respected Muay Thai fighter who from South Africa, who people thought was going to make some noise inside the UFC. He had a big KO on Dana White's Contender Series. And in that bout, all you saw was Don Madge looking to grapple, because he wanted nothing to do with the striking skills that Zaim even had back then as a kid, right? He is a nasty striker, and he stifled the majority of those takedowns. He really did. So even then, he was showing well-roundedness. Now, the one time he was exposed in that field was when Terrence McKinney took him down in the first round and caught him in a rear naked choke. But even then, he was so young, and we've seen him develop his grappling a lot. Okay, a lot. And we've seen some of these high-level fighters that he's been in there with not be able to have consistent success enough to get their hand raised, right? He just defeated Mike Davis. The knockout that he had on Matt Frivola, he was really frustrating Frivola, stuffing takedowns, working in the clinch, and we made good money on both of those fights there. So Zaim is a real fan favorite here at Walk the Line, and I like Zaim a lot. I think he has a lot of potential. You give him a couple more years, and I think that he's really making some noise in this division. He needs to continue to have success against higher level competition, and Caio is not that. I think that Caio is a good fighter, a decent fighter. We got to see that he's a little better than we initially thought that he was, even though Guram Kutateladze is a fighter that is a head case, and he's fallen off a cliff, as we've seen him continuously hurt. But even in that fight, I think that we saw There's some steps being made by Kwai. The knockout over Muhammad Yahya is not going to do anything for me. I've been one of the first people that have been saying that fighter was a fraud, right? We called that out. He was able to get into the UFC through some connections, I believe. And I mean, the beating he just took it was bad. But you go back to the Mark Diakase fight. The Mark Diakase fight was one where he was controlled for 8 minutes and 38 seconds. You're not going to just quickly forget that. Zaim has high-level jiu-jitsu and grappling is developing, and I could see him potentially exposing Kwai down on the mat still. I don't know if Kwai has made those adjustments, and regardless, Zaim's the better striker. He's the better overall fighter here, okay? And I have him winning this fight without a doubt. He has the reach advantage to go along with you name it. All right, so Zaim continues to roll here. And you take a look at the betting line. He's a big-time favorite. He's one of the bigger fighters on the card. We've seen him opening up around minus 240, coming down all the way to minus 340. And don't be surprised if it continues to go that route. He could be a fighter that settles in around minus 450, 500. I don't know how far it's going to go, but I like him to win this fight. And if Kwai is going to have success, I think that he has to land a KO, essentially. He has to land something very big in this fight. Zaim has still never been KO'd. The one route that we've seen him vulnerable is to being submitted, and that was when he was younger. He's putting a lot of work there, and Kwai is really not that guy. Just 2 subs out of his 10 victories. Okay, this isn't the Brazilian fighter that goes to jiu-jitsu, his jiu-jitsu. He's the Brazilian fighter that has those striking and Muay Thai skills. You know what I'm saying? That's who he is, and this is Zaim's fight, and I'll say that he wins. I'm going to go with the decision route. That's one thing I will give credit to Kwai. He's shown to be pretty durable. He's hasn't taken a lot of damage. I think that he can survive this fight to the final bell, but he'll be a step behind. Modestas Bukauskas takes on Paul Craig. This fight is in the light heavyweight division, as Craig has made the recent move back up to his old weight class after not really having too much success down at 185. He had the victory over Andre Muniz, but besides that, he ended his middleweight stint on a 3-fight losing skid. All before coming up in his last fight where he took on Rodolfo Bellato. And if you guys remember how that one played out 2 months ago, that was an awkward one. You hit him with the illegal up kick, and Bellato had that delayed reaction of being knocked out. It was very strange. But nevertheless, here Craig is, and he's matched up with Bukauskas, who Bukauskas, he comes in to this fight card training with his fellow teammate, Ante Delija, who also gets in that work with Tom Aspinall and all of them. So he is preparing with some solid talent around him. And I think that Bukauskas is a real stylistic nightmare. I guess I would go that far to say a nightmare, a bad stylistic matchup for a fighter like Paul Craig. Because when you look at the numbers, Paul Craig is a fighter that typically has that success with his grappling and his jiu-jitsu, right? Bukauskas has only been subbed one time in his professional career. And then you look at the bulk amount of losses that Craig has, and they are due to being knocked out. And I believe that Bukauskas is a threat there, right? He's had 10 knockout victories out of his 18, and he can be dangerous there, right? So I could see him stifling the grappling attack of Craig. He knows what he's doing there, where he then could potentially find himself in a position to get that knockout. And, and speaking of his grappling abilities, I mean, even in the Marcin Patterson fight, he had a lot of adversity throughout it. And then eventually he gets that 3rd round sub, showing that he's poised there. He had the 1st round KO over Rafael Sequeira, which I know Sequeira is very low level, but still he showcases that he can come, press the action forward, and land on you. And that was the difference in the last fight against Cutelaba, which I did have him winning. Besides the fact that it was an official play of mine, I know it was a close bout. Some people thought that Cutelaba won. I really believe that it was Bukauskas that was in control, using his striking and his footwork, although there were points in time in that fight where the output wasn't great. Okay, but I just don't think that this is a fight where even if you have low output, it's going to affect you too much. I'm just not a big fan of Craig's striking. He can be kind of aggressive, but it's just not there for me. I'm more concerned with Craig being caught with some type of counter strike. You take a look at the numbers for both men, and they don't look that good, right? Bukauskas being landed on more than he's putting out there. Same could be said for Craig. You see a little bit more volume from both aspects for Bukauskas, which is funny because he had a very lackluster performance from an energy standpoint in that last fight. But when things are rolling, he does bring that energy typically. And I expect to see that here. And even if he is more patient, the counter could be there. He's the sharper striker. He's the more complete fighter here. And unfortunately for all you Craig supporters, I just don't see him getting his hand raised here. He is a pretty big dog, though. So if you do like him, you could potentially argue there's some value on him as an underdog, as he's a plus 250. I still don't really like it, though. Even though that line's that wide, I still don't like it. Styles make fights, and I just don't see him having success with his grappling. Bukauskas is going to stifle him. Whether he gets the knockout is really what I want to talk about here. And I'm going to say that Bukauskas does get a TKO finish. I'm going to say that Craig opens himself up with his aggression, trying to pull something off, and Bukauskas lands something heavy on him, and he gets a stoppage. It could end kind of in a funky way, but give me the TKO stoppage for Bukauskas, and maybe that's something that you want to take a look at there. But, on the money line, minus 335, we're seeing this line as high as a minus 360. It's as low as a minus 318. So it really depends what line you're able to get. I would like Bukauskas more in the high minus 200s, even then, if you can get that there. That's something that you could potentially work with. So let's see where this line goes. But Bukauskas has a nice matchup for himself here. Balajioki takes on Mason Jones in the lightweight division. These are two fighters that, if they put it together, I think that they have a promising future. And realistically, both of them could have promising futures moving forward. Even the fighter that takes an L here still has time to put things together, especially if this is a fight that entertains and if it's close and if it's competitive. All right. Mason Jones had a pretty impressive UFC return party when he defeated Jeremy Stephens, as he welcomed Jeremy Stephens back to the octagon. And what we saw there, quite simply, was that Mason Jones was the more complete fighter. He was the younger, more fresh fighter. He had more mileage on him, and he was the fighter that's more dedicated to the sport of MMA. Well, on the other hand, we know Stephens has a lot more going on outside of MMA, as he has a huge fight coming up against Mike Perry. And tip of my hat to my boy Stephens, man. I've been following him forever, and I had the pleasure of chatting it up with him a little bit over the past year or so, and gave me that follow on IG. As you guys know, I like to throw that out there a little bit, and I know it ruffles a few of your guys' feathers, and I'm sorry about that. But I am a fight fan, all right? So with Stephens, man, a real entertainer, and Stephens had some moments in that fight, but it was Mason Jones that was just much more complete. And Jones had success with his striking as well. He's a technical striker, technical grappler. There's a lot to like about him. In retrospect, you take a look back at his initial stint with the UFC, the only L's he took were by way of Mike Davis and Ludovic Klein. Those are two very respectable names. Also, when you take into consideration where Jones was at that time, he wasn't fully developed. He was a young fighter, but even in the mix of those losses, he had a victory over David Onama, who was very much respected. Okay, and after being cut by the UFC, goes over to Cage Warriors. It sounds familiar, right? We just we're talking about a story like this, and the Rhys McKee situation, goes back to Cage Warriors, strings off 3 victories in a row, and they were by this was 4 victories instead of 3, but also 3 knockouts in a row, and then the last one was via decision. Not crazy about the level of competition, but when you watch the tape in those fights, he looked very good. Okay. On the other hand, when you're talking Balajioki, this is a fighter, if he could put it together, like I said, he's dangerous, but he's shown to make mental mistakes. I didn't like what he did in the Chris Duncan fight. I thought that the recipe to victory there was to create space and get the better of the striking, which he was starting to do that. And Duncan is there to be hit at times, even though Duncan has progressed so much as a fighter. But we saw Oki landing, and then Oki looked to change levels and showcase some of the wrestling development that he has had. But he put himself in a guillotine choke, and that wasn't a good look. And I'll tell you what, in his last fight against Michael Aswell, he was victorious. But if you remember that, Aswell took that fight on short notice. Aswell is a fighter that fights at a lower weight class. He was undersized. And I thought that if Aswell didn't slow down, he actually was looking pretty decent. Or specifically early on in that fight, he was looking decent. So I wasn't crazy about the performance there. I think that Mason Jones is more of a threat. He's a larger fighter. Okay, he's a real lightweight here, and he checks off more boxes. And I like Mason Jones. Now, this is one for me where I expect to see a high pace to it, which kind of leans me towards maybe we see something wild take place and some kind of finish happens. But my more grounded pick would be just to say Mason Jones wins this fight via decision. When you really break it down, you turn over all the stones. I think that's the most likely scenario, and I'll settle in with the Mason Jones decision pick. And we've seen his line coming down. We see him over here opening up as a minus 225 favorite, coming down to a minus 164. Let's see what other lines are available for Mason. You see him here, similar situation, opening up as a minus 215. He's now a minus 155. So this line is coming down. I would stand on this fight saying that I would like to see that line to continue coming down that way, and I would want to be on the Mason Jones side. There was a part of me when I was initially breaking down this fight that was stating and kind of leaning towards, okay, the value's in the dog here. This is a close match. We don't know how this fight's going to really play out. Oki's dangerous too. He's game. He's young. He's developing. But I like Mason. I like Mason. I think that he proves to be a little bit more complete as a whole, and he puts it together here and gets his hand raised via decision. So I would rather be on his side, and minus 130, 135, 40. I think that would be where you'd want to be, though. I believe this fight has taken this card to that next level, right? I'm highly anticipating this match here between BSD and Mauricio Rufy. Both of these fighters are polarizing figures in the lightweight division. They're different in their own ways. Of course, Rufy is the video game character, okay? He hits you with those highlight reel KOs. He has us jumping out of our seats. He's a real treat to watch. On the other hand, it's not that BSD isn't extremely entertaining, but his style is very different, right? He looks to just bombard you, push the pace on you. He'll look to break you with his grappling and his pressure. And I'm very interested to see how this fight's going to play out. And as Sean Strickland likes to say, here's the thing. When you're talking Mauricio Rufy, here's the thing. Let's dissect him here for a second. All right. When things are going well, they go very well. All right. His wins, his finishes typically are stellar. And it makes his stock rise a little bit higher than maybe it should be. You hear these rumors about everyone at the Fighting Nerd saying that he's actually the best talent to come out of that gym. And, you know, that's probably a lot to do with the fact that he can move and do certain things differently than these other fighters can do. But when you're locked into a cage, it's not always about how flashy you can fight and if you could make certain movements that other fighters can't. When you're in a real fight, okay, you better check off all kinds of boxes. Your grappling better be elite. Your cardio better be elite as you start to fight these fighters that are the best in the world, as you continue to rise in competition. And I do believe there are some holes in Rufy's game. Okay. When you take a look at the James Lontop fight, that was a fight where I think that we saw he does have some cardio issues, and it has a lot to do with his fighting style. He has this explosive, quick twitched style. All right. And it's very similar to Conor McGregor's. And you guys have all heard about the similarities and the comparisons to Rufy and a prime McGregor, right? He's like an orthodox style prime McGregor, how he's light on his feet and he's willing to throw these unorthodox type of attacks at you, and he has big power. Okay, I understand all that, but you look at that James Lontop fight, and that was a red flag. Okay, remember, it was James that outstruck him 112-74. James kind of let him get off the hook a little bit. I felt that he could have even pushed the pace a little bit more so. Now, Rufy took this fight based off the fact that he was landing much cleaner strikes, right? The more impactful strikes. But you're playing a dangerous game if you're going to sit back and you're going to just kind of sharpshoot. And if you're not getting the KOs, it's dangerous when the other fighter's the fighter that's the aggressor, that's pushing the pace and who's outlanding you. All right, that could be a problem. And you may look back to his fight on Dana White's Contender Series where he ended up breaking Raymond Magomedov in the third round. But Magomedov is a fighter that doesn't really have good cardio. He's not known for his cardio. We'll give Rufy some credit there, but that's not the type of fighter that I'm talking about. I'm talking about as he takes the step up in competition and he's locked in there with a fighter that's going to become a nonstop for 15 minutes or 25 minutes. That's where I could potentially see some issues. Now, before I come back up to the top of his resume, let's look at his one loss, his lone loss, okay, which was against a fighter that you're probably all familiar with now, Manuel Souza, who is an absolute beast. We just cashed in on him. We had a 2-team parlay on him this past Tuesday, or depending when you're listening to this, the prior Tuesday. That dude hits very hard. What a comeback he had. And real quick, I'll just say, I think that he is a stellar talent. And the only reason why he was down was he was so eager to find a finish. He was putting himself in vulnerable positions. He should have slowed the pace down of that fight. And I think that he would have defended those takedowns and he would have found that finish even earlier. Okay, he got a little bit overeager to perform. He was hunting for subs that he shouldn't have been. He should have just been stuffing takedowns and then working his stand-up, which is stellar. Okay, but in that fight, he put Rufi out. Okay, so let's not act like Rufi's just invincible. This is a fighter that in his young career has already been legitimately KO'd. Now, I don't think that BSD is the same kind of striker. He has a different type of style. But you know what? If he starts to bombard Rufi here, and if Rufi slows down, it's not out of the realm that there could be some type of stoppage like that. Okay, I'm just throwing this all out to you. But the real path to victory, in my opinion, is that BSD changes levels, mixes the takedowns in, and just has the superior cardio, which you may be saying, wait a second, BSD is not really known for his cardio. He's had some performances where he showed out and has dug deep late, but a lot of you guys are probably thinking about the Dustin Poirier fight, which he went out there and he pushed a quick pace and then he kind of broke down, even though he was hit with some big shots too. But that was a fight where he was coming into it with some health issues. He was on antibiotics. I believe it was due to staph or there was something going on there, if you guys remember. And he kind of had the game plan where he was going to go out on his shield early, or he was going to find that finish. That was kind of the rumors there. I mean, let's not forget some of the performances that he's had back in the day where he was just coming nonstop like an animal. And in fact, if you go back to his loss, right, it wasn't even a victory. You go back to the L that he took against Zaleski dos Santos, which was very early in his career, very early when you take into consideration how long he's been fighting. Okay, this isn't a fighter that's been fighting from a young age either. Okay, Zaleski dos Santos was battering him. He never looked for a way out. He's so damn tough, and sometimes he's a little too tough for his own good, as we saw in the Renato Moicano fight, where he just wasn't even willing to stall out a 1 round in a 5-round fight and take an L in a round just to go to the next one. And he starts putting himself in vulnerable positions where he's taking unnecessary damage, and then you see a stoppage like we saw in the Moicano fight. So you can also question his IQ. I definitely believe you can question his IQ when you look at the Poirier fight and the Moicano fight. But also note, his IQ is a little low, but it kind of correlates to the bull that he is. Okay, this isn't a fighter that second guesses himself. He's gonna come at you, and don't overlook how that pays off for him. Okay, you remember the Matt Frevola fight, the Thiago Moises bout, the Ismael Bonfim fight. Even then, that's when he started to put himself on the map. We saw him going out there and just pushing the pace and just breaking dudes, and we saw that his grappling is pretty damn elite, especially for a fighter that doesn't really have that grappling base from a young age. This isn't like some Olympic wrestler or D1 wrestler, right? It's not his style, okay? But he has the intangibles. We know that he does a lot more than just fight too, okay? He's a fighter outside of the cage. I mean, this guy's very mentally tough, and he's just 29 years old, and hopefully he's learning from some of his mistakes, and this is a great matchup. You take a look at these fighters, both 29 years old, very similar in their careers with the amount of professional experience, different styles, but I'm pumped for this fight, and I got to give you guys a selection right now. So some of you guys probably thought I was going to go with the dog pick here, which we're going to get to the line, which BSD is the underdog. I'll tell you what, I wasn't able to pull the trigger on BSD as the dog here. Okay, I'm not able to pick him, I'll say that, but I'm definitely saying that the value is on the dog here. The only problem I have with picking BSD is Rufi is damn talented, first and foremost, but the fact that BSD defensively, he's not the best. He takes damage, and I think that if you go out there taking damage against a fighter like Rufi, it's very likely that he hurts you bad and finishes you and cuts you open, or just does something bad to you. And some of the IQ decisions that BSD has made, it has pushed me away from siding with him. But I would not be surprised, to say the least, if this fight plays out extremely competitive. In fact, I expect it to play out extremely competitive. And we'll see if BSD can take this fight over in the later rounds, and we'll see if he can look to do a lot of what James Lontop did to Rufi. And Rufi is not very battle tested. Don't forget that either. That's the last thing I'll say real quick. You take a look at the resume that he has, the level of competition. You're talking Jamie Malarkey, James Lontop, and Bobby Green, an old Bobby Green who, come on, okay, he's not the same fighter. I mean, respect to Green, but Green's not the same fighter these days. So what are you really talking about? You want to mention the Ronnie Torres victory outside the UFC? I mean, he's fought some decent talent outside the UFC, but there's not a lot to talk about here. You better have some question marks about who Ruffy is. If you're putting up big money on him with where the line is, you may be jumping out of your seat and cashing your tickets as he lands another highlight KO. It's very likely, but you got a dog that's going to be squaring off across the cage from him. I'm telling you guys that right now. BSD is a dog, okay? And I think the value's in the dog. But, final pick, I'll say Ruffy gets that. I'll say he gets that first or second round KO. And I'm looking at this fight to end within the first 2 rounds. Hey, you guys, if you want my official targets for this card, you guys can shoot me an email or DM me on Instagram and Twitter, which I have popping up below. That's what I call it Twitter, right? We're not calling it X, are we? Is anyone really calling it X? I don't know why Elon did that, man. Twitter was just so much smoother to say, but shoot me a message. And while you're at it too, go give me a follow on those platforms, man. It's greatly appreciated. I'll give you further details if you're interested. And also, don't forget, we got Dana White's Contender Series taking place every Tuesday, right? My plays, if you sign up for a month package or a long-term package, or even if you sign up for a weekend package, I will include that week's Dana White's Contender Series episode as well. So it's a great time to get on board. We've been undefeated with our Dana White's Contender Series picks during this current season. So reach out to me. And as always, if you sign up through my referral link to Bovada, I will give you a week package for free. That's included, of course. So if you're interested, reach out to me. Here we go. We got the main event, a matchup between 2 top 7 ranked middleweight fighters. And as a lot of you guys believe, the winner of this fight will be fighting for the title next. And that is the most likely outcome if these fighters go out there and perform. Nassourdine Imavov takes on Caio Borralho. Imavov ranked number 2, Caio ranked number 7th. And this is a very high level match. This is an exciting bout. It's great to see 2 fighters like this matched up in, I won't say their primes, because I think that there is still more growth to come from them, but these are 2 fighters that are doing it already at a very high level, okay? Caio, his striking is starting to come around as to be expected when you think about the training partners that he has, but his grappling is extremely elite. And then you could almost say the exact thing in reverse, right? Imavov, his striking is elite, but his grappling has also came around, okay? He's rounded out his game immensely over the last couple years. And, as we put these fighters under the magnifying glass a little bit more so, and you realize Imavov is just 29 years old, that is a scary thought. That is. I mean, yeah, Caio, like I said, he's still developing. He's going to look better and better over the next 2-3 years. But Imavov hasn't even cracked the 30 marker. And we've seen rapid improvement in his game. Okay, you take a look, you scroll all the way back to when he took that L. I want to start with the Phil Haas loss, right? He came in to that fight off of a UFC debut victory over Jordan Williams. You take that one for what you will. Williams was very undersized and didn't hang around. But the Phil Haas fight, that was a fight where Imavov, his cardio cost him, and he almost had a late stoppage. But he was such a green fighter back then compared to what he is now. And then from there, you started to see the striking on full display. He went on a 2-fight winning streak, getting knockouts in both, or I should say a 3-fight winning streak. But in his first 2, he had knockouts over Edmund Shabazian and Ian Heinisch. He defeated Joaquin Buckley, which, you look back at that victory in retrospect, that was a very respectable W. The only other loss he took in the UFC was against Sean Strickland, and he just wasn't ready for that task at the time. But since that L, okay, the Chris Curtis fight was essentially a victory. He was definitely getting the better of that fight before the stoppage, and he was en route to getting his hand raised before the unfortunate circumstance, which I believe, if I remember correctly, was due to an eye poke or whatnot. But Curtis was taking an L in that fight, and I believe he said he couldn't see. He was looking for a way out. He then started to get these big names on his resume. The Cannonier fight was a great look for him. Some people argued that was an early stoppage, but regardless, he was taking over that fight, and the stoppage was due to come, and he was outclassing Cannonier. Okay, Allen's an absolute beast. You talk about a respectable victory to have in this division. Okay, Brendan Allen's name is right up there towards the top. Adesanya is a legend, one of the greatest middleweights of all time. Number 2, realistically. Okay, and then on the other hand, we dissect Caio here. I think that he is a wonderful fighter, but let's dissect the victories that he has throughout his career, or specifically since he's been working with the UFC. And I'm not extremely high on them. All right, he came in to the UFC as he had to get back-to-back victories in DWCS because he wasn't entertaining enough that first time against Aaron Jeffrey, which Jeffrey, that's a very respectable opponent to have. Jeffrey's a stud. He's been putting in a lot of work outside the UFC. He's a UFC caliber fighter, but he didn't entertain there. And then he went into the Jesse Murray fight and he finished him up in the first round. But how about the UFC debut match against Oumar Gachiev? Okay, that fighter retired after that next bout that he took in Ellen, right? He went on a 2-fight losing skid, and then he retires from the sport. He lost to Abu Bakar, I believe, or one of those guys over there. And, he loses that fight in 2022, never fights again. So you know where he was at mentally. Arman Petrosian's a very lacking fighter. Makhmud Miradov is a fighter that vanished from the sport. Michal Oleksiejczak is lacking with his grappling. Okay, Abus Megomedov is not a bad fighter. You can kind of rave about that a little bit, even though he's limited and he's not on these guys' levels. Okay. Paul Craig, we just talked about him. And then you got Cannonier, which when he fought Cannonier, that was a hell of a fight. He dug deep in that match and started to showcase some of the development with his striking. But you saw the difference when Imavov was in there with Cannonier. Okay. You saw who was landing the more devastating shots, who was setting up the finish when they faced off. And it's a little bit of fight math. Take it for what you will. But I do believe that Imavov is a little bit more proven there. And I don't want to simplify this fight too much, but this is how I look at it. If you want to simplify it, Imavov has solid grappling skills, solid anti-grappling skills. I think that he can keep this fight from staying down on the mat. Okay, if he's taken down a little here and there, I don't expect him to be controlled completely. This is a 25-minute fight. I think that at the very least, he's bouncing back up. But I actually even believe there's a great chance that he defends and doesn't even really go there. I think that he is the more refined striker. He's the more dangerous striker. If we see a finish here, I think it's more so going to come by way of Imavov stopping Caio. And Caio, to me, seems like a fighter that's just, he's game. He's an absolute dog. He's willing to continue to entertain and showcase his developing striking. And he almost gets away with some of the flaws that he has because he's such a dog and he pressures and he intimidates and he has the threat of the grappling to go along with his striking. But make no mistake, his striking is not on the level of an Imavov's. Imavov is much more sharp. It's much more technical. And he's a big dude. They're both big for this weight class. I think that Imavov keeps this fight standing and he gets the better of the striking. And if he doesn't find that knockout, I still say he's the fighter that's landing damage. He's the fighter that's going to outpoint Caio. He takes at least 3 rounds here. And that's the route I'm going to go. I'm going to say that Imavov wins this fight 3-2 on the scorecards. I'm going to say he takes 3 rounds and Caio gets a couple here and there. But Imavov's cardio has gotten better and better. And I'm definitely sticking with my guns here as I was on Imavov. As soon as this fight was announced, I was on Imavov. I've been seeing a lot of action come in on Caio, and I really do have a lot of respect for Caio's game, and I know he's not a walk in the park, and I've been tempted to change my mind here, but I'm sticking to my guns here. I like Imavov. I really like what he has going for himself. He'll have the crowd behind him. Don't forget that as well. I mean, don't overlook that. Never overlook that aspect of the fight, even though the judging, when I say the judging is getting better, I don't mean overall. There's atrocious scorecards, but you don't typically see what we used to see. Back in the day, I feel that the hometown fighters would get the nod a lot more so than you see nowadays. Nowadays, it's like the judging, they're under the magnifying glass in that sense, at least, where they don't really pay attention to the crowd. In the old days, they would pay attention to it a lot more, but there's still a slight impact there. Okay, when you hear the crowd roaring every time one fighter lands a strike compared to the other, it does have a slight impact, and I'll put that as a little notch for Imavov, but I already think he's the superior fighter here. Taking him to win this fight, to win a unanimous decision. The split decision's on the table too. We could see a split here because I have it close, right? 3-2. It's going to be closely contested, but the difference will be the more refined striking of Imavov's.